Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Today I thought we'd honor Jim Davis himself by making a 100% accurate Garfield sculpture. So we're going to start as usual by balling up a bunch of aluminum foil to create the base structure for Garfield's body. Garfield himself is rather blob-like, so we're not going to worry about any kind of wire armature. We're just going to jump right in with the polymer clay and start covering our aluminum foil ball till we get sort of a chicken nugget or potato-like shape. Go ahead with the back of the paintbrush and start blending everything in. And once we've got the form roughly there, we'll go ahead and take another little ball of clay to create Garfield's head. Just squish it on and start blending it into the rest of the body. From there, we can take our trusty back of a paintbrush and start roughing in some features, some eye sockets, a line for the mouth, and a little indication of where his chest is going to fall to start establishing some anatomy. From there, we'll go ahead and take another chunk of clay and start roughing in his fabulous posterior. And that's looking pretty good. We'll also use the back of the paintbrush to create the indication of a couple of neck wrinkles, and we can then go ahead and finesse the eye sockets and reestablish the mouth and nose a little bit. We're just roughly sketching stuff in right now. We'll add a little more clay to create the belly, blend that in. And then we'll go in with a couple crescent shapes and establish Garfield's chest. Followed by a couple round balls to create the eyes. We'll push those into the eye sockets and blend them in. And it's at this point it's dawning on me he's looking a little bit less like our classic Garfield and a little more like the McDonald's character Grimace, but I'm going to run with it. From there, we take a couple little rounded shapes and establish Garfield's muzzle, using the paddle tool to blend it in under the eye. Follow that up with a little half sphere for the chin and some sausage shapes to create the wrinkles and flesh folds underneath his chin. Garfield is fond of lasagna, as every Garfield fan knows, so we're going to establish some nice weight below his chin and blend that in with the back of the paintbrush. Follow that up with a couple round balls for the corners of his mouth, creating Garfield's cheeks. And then we can use the paddle tool to finesse the mouth line and carve some finer lines into his chin. We'll follow that up with some thin clay snakes under the chest to create some fleshy folds. We'll layer this up to really show gravity doing its work and then blend it in with the back of the paintbrush. Again, using the paddle tool to carve in some deeper lines and really create a sense of anatomy. Also using the paddle tool to carve in some bags under the eyes, and we'll also use this to establish some wrinkles on the forehead. Garfield hates Mondays, so that concern is going to show through on his everyday face. We'll take two more thin snakes of clay to establish his eyelids, then go in with the paddle tool to blend that in and create some wrinkles on the lids themselves. Yeah, now he's looking pretty relaxed. I like it. And finally, we'll add a little triangle of clay for the nose. Traditionally, Garfield has more of an oval-shaped nose, but we're going for a more realistic effect here, which I think is what Jim Davis had in mind. So we'll take the back of the paintbrush, carve in some nostrils, and then go in with the paddle tool to carve the fine line in the middle of the nose. We'll use the sharp edge on the other end of the paddle tool to carve some wrinkles into the lips, creating a dry, crackled effect. Garfield's a little parched. Taking inspiration from Joel Schumacher's bat suit, we'll put two little spheres of clay to create some anatomically correct nipples. Then we'll take the back of the paintbrush, carve in a nice little butt crack, and we'll add a few circles of clay to create the effect of spinal vertebrae, then blend that in. Finally, using the edge of the paintbrush, we'll hit Garfield's tummy in rapid succession, which creates the effect of gathered fat cells or cellulite using sort of a cross-hatching effect. We'll do this on his posterior as well, and he's looking pretty good. Finally, we'll take the back of the paintbrush and start dotting in some fine pores on Garfield's nose. Still using the back of the paintbrush, we'll go in and hatch a bunch of fine lines to create the effect of fur on his back. And then using plastic wrap and a toothpick, we can create finer wrinkles on Garfield's flesh. To create his arms, we'll take a couple little cylinders of clay and rough in the shape. Another arm for the other side. At this point, I've pre-baked Garfield's torso, and then using a toothpick and the back of a paintbrush, I can blend the arms into the body and start finessing the forms, carving out the indication of an elbow and other musculature. Then using the paddle tool, we'll create creases in the crook of the arm. The fingers are just little clay sausages, rolled out and then blended in. We'll use the paddle tool to carve in some deeper anatomy, and then using little balls create his knuckles and wrist joint, and then blend it all in together. For his fingernails, we're simply going to take the back of the paintbrush and create a little graphic divot in each fingertip. And then using a little clay snake, we'll create a wrinkle to integrate the shoulder with the rest of the body. And it's at this point he's starting to look less like McDonald's Grimace and more like Slimer from Ghostbusters, which I think Jim Davis would appreciate. To create his ears, we'll add 2 little triangles of clay, blend them in, and then carve in the ear cavity with the back of the paintbrush. And then we'll add a snazzy tongue, using a little clay roll and taking a toothpick to carve in the divot. Then detailing with little taste buds using, once again, you guessed it, the back of the paintbrush. For Garfield's feet, I'm not going to worry too much about the underlying anatomy. We're just going to take a couple little cylindrical shapes, stick them right underneath his belly, then use the paddle tool to carve in toes in the back of the paintbrush to create the indication of toenails. Then we can roll out some thin discs for the nails themselves and detail them with the paddle tool, carving in little ridges and breaks. And then finally we'll create Garfield's majestic tail, rolling a little cone out of polymer clay, blending it in, and then using the paddle tool to carve some ridges. Garfield loves food, and he'd feel incomplete without a snack. So to make a hot dog, we're going to roll a little cylinder of clay for the bun, carve into it with the sharp edge of our paddle tool, then add a little clay snake inside to create the hot dog itself, detailing the edges with the sharp end of the paddle tool to create a nice pucker. From there, we can take a thin roll of polymer clay to create a squirt of mustard, zigzagging it for optimal aesthetic effect. And from there, our sculpt is done, so we can move to paint. We'll base coat Garfield with his signature bright orange, taking care to cover every nook and cranny of his wrinkly little bod. To bring out all the detail that we've carved in via wrinkles and flesh folds, we'll then go in with a very dark wash. I'm using a mix of black and purple to complement the orange of his flesh tone. And while it might look a little heavy here, this thick base coat is going to create a lot of texture once it's dry. And from there we can go in with a lighter flesh tone to pop out Garfield's muzzle. I'm watering it down around the cheek so we can get a nice smooth fade into the orange of his fur. And then we'll add some pure white for his eyes. The rest of him is so detailed I decided to go pretty graphic and simple with the eyes to create contrast. Then for Garfield's back, we can go in with a fine brush and some black paint to create the signature black stripes that everybody recognizes. I'm being a little bit impressionistic with this because I've carved so much detail into the back. What's most important is that it reads graphic, it's less about the individual lines. Then we can take some dark red and pop out his tongue, and I'll use my wet blending technique here with some lighter pink and white to create a nice variation in the tone. Then we'll do the same thing on his nose with a lighter pink. To create Garfield's signature whiskers, hair wisps, I don't know what they are, the things coming out the side of his head. We'll take some floral wire, bend kinks into it, paint it black, and then use some super glue to embed it into holes I've already put into the sculpt. We'll also super glue his hot dog into his hand. And then all that's left is to paint in his pupils. Again, I'm keeping his eyes graphic, with a simple black pupil, and then a bright white specular highlight to pop it out. And with that, our 100% accurate Garfield sculpt is done, so let's take a look at the final result. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.